These are stories of outdoor adventure and expert advice from folks with calloused hands. I'm James Nash, and this is the Six Ranch Podcast. All right, so yesterday I flew out of Redmond, Oregon into Billings, Montana, the state of my youth. I have such good feelings about Montana. And now at the Tactacam headquarters with Mr. Gregg Farrell. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well. Thanks for coming to visit us.
Yeah, thanks for showing me around. That was good food.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, I can't complain. They do a pretty good job. They cater in from somewhere else every day, and not too many of them are not palatable. So
you have catered lunch for all of your employees every day?
Yep, correct.
And there's a walk-in cooler full of all kinds of drinks.
Anything from protein coffees to Jägermeister and energy drinks.
Yeah.
Like, you want it. Busch Lights. I think there's some of those in
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, I looked left and I was like, oh, it can be that kind of day too.
Yeah, it just depends what kind of day it is, whether it's a Monday or a Friday.
This company's growing a lot, and that's a pretty exciting phase of a company to be in, isn't it?
Super exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were talking a little bit about it when we were walking around the office when you first got here, but what I've found really interesting about this place is the high growth is great. To your point, it's an exciting thing to be a part of, right? I think most organizations, when they grow as much and as fast as we have, there's some downsides that come with that, right? And the grass isn't always greener, right? Every place has its thing. But what I've found very unique about Tactacam in the last 2.5 years that I've been here is the culture seems to run so strong through the employees, and I think it really truly is from the top down here, that I would say we've been able to weather that storm of growth in a way that I haven't necessarily seen or experienced before in terms of maintaining culture and small company feel, while still having the bandwidth and power of that number of employees to really do impactful things. So it's an interesting sweet spot that I haven't, like I said, necessarily been a part of or seen before. So that's been really fun to be a part of.
Something that impresses me here that I haven't seen in a lot of the other companies that I've worked with or had relationships in the past. Jeff Peel is in the trenches. That's not normal. That the founder of a company that succeeds at this level is like still doing the thing.
Well, and I think that honestly, that's the reason why I was able just to describe the situation that this place is to you, right? Yeah. Like, we say it and it sounds cliche, but you hear it a lot in this office. Like, this truly is a dirt under the fingernails type of work environment. And it doesn't matter if you are the CEO in Jeff Peel, right? Or if you are on day number 1 of your employment at this organization. Everybody here works. There is not anybody who's just telling other people what to do. And I think that's a lot of the reason why we still have the culture we do.
Yeah. Interesting. Do you remember your first trail camera?
I do.
What was it?
Okay. I can't tell you brand name. I can tell you that it was the cheapest thing I could possibly find. I bought it at a Fleet Farm in Wisconsin, and it required me to essentially hook up a car battery to it that was at the base of the tree. Yeah. I wish I could remember the brand name. It probably was some off-brand that doesn't even exist or wasn't relevant at the time. But yeah, that was my first trail camera. And it had a white flash.
Yeah.
Yep.
My first trail camera used film.
I believe that.
And it had D-cell batteries, and you had to put a roll of film into it and pull it out, get it in the tracks, close this thing up, and it would take 32 pictures that you would then have to go back and get that roll of film, take to town, and have them developed. And I had set it up over a dead pile on the ranch. And I thought, I'm going to get coyotes or something like that. What I got was a bunch of blurry photos of birds, and then it took one picture at night, and all you could see were these eyes like circling in, which must have been coyotes, I think. But I was so excited by that. I was so thrilled by that photo. And I was like, man, this thing can watch something while I'm not there. This is cool. And moving from that to where we're at with Reveal now, like, my gosh, I could have never imagined, right? Could have never imagined.
It's wild. I mean, I even think back to, I'm dating myself here, right? But I ran the archery counter at a Gander Mountain through college. That was that was my college job.
Yeah.
And even the evolution of what trail cameras were when I started there my freshman year, right, versus when I stopped working there my senior year, and the evolution that took place in those 4 years, and that was longer than I would like to admit ago, right? 20 years ago. And to your point, where we've come now, I mean, it's not even the same thing. It's a different playing field.
Since you're an expert in the field, let's talk about, like, regardless of the brand somebody's using, let's talk about some of the fundamentals of trail camera employment. There's with the elk guys, there's really two schools of thought I see. They either want it like 30 to 36 inches off the ground, or like 7.5 feet off the ground. Are you a low hang or a high hang guy?
To me, it really depends on two things: where I'm hanging it, so private or public land.
Yeah.
And I'm speaking mostly from a whitetail perspective.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my first determining factor. And then the second is what I'm trying to capture. So I'll give you a couple examples, right? On public land, I typically like to hang cameras high, to the point where I'll even bring like a single climbing stick with me in the woods on my scouting missions. And I'll try and get those things up 10, 12 feet, just frankly so that it's harder for people to reach them.
Yeah. And they'll probably never even see them because people don't look up.
Correct.
Like that. Yeah.
Correct. And if they do, can they still get it? Yeah. Absolutely. But it's just one more barrier to entry.
Right.
Another instance where I would hang them higher, even on like a private land situation, is, let's say I have a singular trail, right, that I'm trying to catch animals walking on this trail. You would never want to put a camera directly perpendicular to that trail. In my perspective, I wouldn't, because that animal then has to cross. There's only one place they can cross, right? Where if it's parallel to the trail or facing up or down the trail, you have a wider range of which the camera can take multiple photos of that animal. Or if it's set to video mode, you get a longer period of time that the animal's in that specific range. The other thing that helps that is hanging a camera higher, because you get that elevated point of view. So in that situation, I might hang a camera high as well. But I would say for me, 8 out of 10 times, I'm in that waist to chest height is kind of my sweet spot. I hang them lower because the perspective you're going to get of an animal at that height gives you a lot more data, right? In terms of age class, size of antlers, if you're interested in that. It's not distorted, right? You can see a lot more at that height than you can from an elevated perspective.
What about which direction, like cardinal direction to face camera?
Again, I think it depends. There's situations where you're limited, right? Like you have to point in a certain direction.
Yeah.
Now, we talked about this earlier too. A camera facing north, you're going to get less false triggers, right? So that's always a good thing if you can. On the opposite end of the spectrum, I always want my solar panels facing south. So if you take those two things into consideration, right, like a lot of time that's going to determine which direction a camera's facing. To me, it also depends too, like, is it on the ridge? Is it in the bottom of a bowl, right? Like those things typically impact what direction a camera's facing. I try never face a camera south, right? There's varying degrees of east and west. If I need to cheat it, I will. But to your point earlier, like your best bet's always north if you can swing it. Yeah.
South, you'll get a lot of like really, really blown out photos, even besides the false triggers, just because morning and evening, you're going to have the sun at a really low angle. So if an animal triggers, you're not going to be able to see it very well because you've got a lot of light coming in. Mm-hmm. There's also the balance of whether you're facing it down a trail or across a trail for how those PIR sensors work. And I think that's something that a lot of people don't understand is what is actually causing that camera to trigger. Can you talk through that PIR sensor and what that is and how it works?
Yeah, and I'll give this disclosure. I'm not an engineer, so I'm not going to try and get into the engineering speak on this. But yeah, I think there's a false misconception with trail cameras that it's always motion, right? That sets off a camera. A PIR sensor, in layman's terms, is actually looking for a certain amount of a heat signature, right? And that's what it's actually setting the camera off. Now, a lot of things will give off heat signature, right? Like even a branch blowing in the wind with leaves on it, right? Like there's a heat signature to plants out there too. So some people might say, oh, well, you're wrong, right? Like I had a branch blowing in the wind that set off my camera. But what we're doing, right, and the technology behind that is we're actually tuning those PIR sensors to look for heat signatures of specific sizes, right? So that you're getting less false triggers from, say, a small bird flying in front of your camera or a branch blowing around, right? And it's more based off the size of like a typical ungulate. So, think anything from coyote to moose size, right? That's kind of your sweet spot of what most of those sensors are tuned to actually pick up or trigger the camera to take a picture of.
Gotcha. And then my understanding is that there's basically a bunch of vertical windows in that little brown curved piece that you see on your camera, and when you have a heat differential that changes, that moves between one of those and another, that's what causes the camera to wake up and trigger.
Correct.
Yeah.
And in the same way, you can tune those. So like a lot of camera companies will talk about trigger speed, right? Trigger speed is great in terms of being able to, say, catch a potential animal that's running in front of a camera. But the other thing you don't want is you don't want a camera triggering so fast that the first interruption of that sensor, be it
nose.
like the nose of an animal, right? That's all you're getting. So the other kind of science behind that too is truly tuning those to where 90+% of your photos, you want that animal centered in that photo.
Yeah.
So that's the other kind of secret sauce where it's like, people boast about trigger speed. If it was just trigger speed, you would actually end up with a subpar picture, right? Because again, you just be getting the nose of these animals. So there's some deeper science behind the way these things are developed and set up, right, within the camera itself.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. I think anybody who's run cameras long enough has definitely had like all of those things happen.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So with the trail thing, a piece of advice I would give is 45-degree angle to the trail is going to be a pretty good solution, right? You're going to get if it's a buck or a bull, something with antlers, that's going to give you a good opportunity to be able to see both sides. It gives your camera an opportunity to see that heat signature moving between those different windows in the PIR sensor, and it's a balance of it walking straight towards you versus where it has less exposure to what your camera can actually take a picture of. I use the Defend 360 cam for a game camera quite a bit. And since I live fairly far north, the sun angle is changing a lot throughout the year, right? So in the summertime, the sun is coming up much farther north and setting much farther north than it is in the wintertime. So an angle that would work for me during a certain time of year is now getting blown out by the sun in the morning at a different time of year. Being able to just remote into that camera and then change which direction it's facing, or if I set it up and a bear moves it a little bit or something happens, maybe I'm realizing that I'm not as smart as I think I am and the animals are actually walking through a different part. I don't have to drive all the way out there or hike all the way out there. I can just log into it and move the camera. So that's a pretty slept-on solution for people as well. If you want to have that type of adaptability, you can think outside of the reveal cell cameras and maybe look at like a Defend 360 and play around with that.
Yeah, and as of yesterday, the Defend 360, you can now activate it in the Reveal app.
Thank goodness.
If you want to. So historically, for folks that are listening, we have two kind of separate camera lines. One was Reveal. That's our oldest camera line, and that's more focused on a hunting application.
Yep.
And then Defend, which its origin story is in security, right? The product that you're speaking about, this Defend 360, it was originally released in our security line, but everybody in the office that's hunters, we had the same thought right away, right? It's like, how can I use this in the field?
Right.
So yeah, as of 2 days ago now, you can activate a 360 in the Reveal app. So if you're using it for hunting purposes, because I use 360s in a very similar way that you just mentioned,
Yep.
You can manage them all in one singular app.
Nice. I've been waiting for that, so thank you.
It's live.
Good to know. Some other little camera pro tips that I'll give people. One of the big pieces of information you really want to know, say this camera's set up on a place that you might be coming back to hunt. What's the wind doing there at different times of day? And if you're in the west, you have highly variable winds depending on time of day, depending on storms and things like that. So if you can look at what the wind direction is doing when that animal's coming through, then you've got a pretty good idea which side of that trail you might want to hang a tree stand on or something like that, or which way you want to approach it from. I've been hanging, just like flagging. I've hung feathers on a string with a fishing weight on it, stuff like that, so that anytime an animal comes through, I can look at it and see which way the wind is blowing. Are there any like wind type solutions?
Well, this is a great transition into new product.
Okay, let's talk about it.
So we'll start here because you brought it up. When you look at wind data, right? So even right now, if you look at, the bottom kind of section of a trail camera photo from Reveal or even some of our competitors, a lot of times you'll see a wind direction call it on there.
Yep.
That data comes from essentially weather station data, right? Now, you're most of the time, and I'm speaking in generalities here, it's not 100% true. Most of the time that data is at best zip code specific,
right?
Depending on where the weather station is. A lot of times these weather stations that are collecting wind direction data, they have them in elevated positions with nothing around it. That's on purpose, right? Because they don't want something impacting that. However, if you are in a place where there's topography, right? Any change in elevation. If you're in a place like you mentioned in the West, right, that thermals impact wind direction more so than, say maybe the Midwest. But even the Midwest, let's say you're near a large body of water. All of those things can impact wind direction fairly significantly at the level that we need to know as hunters, right? Like West might be okay to be in a certain spot. Northwest may not. Like we need that degree of accuracy. So one of the new products we actually have coming down the pipe in 2026 is a wind sensor. And what's really cool about this wind sensor is it solves a lot of these problems like you were just trying to solve with, your string and your feather or whatever. It's a small little unit. It comes with a T-post mount, so you can mount it on the top of a T-post. It's kind of a universal mount, so if you choose to do some other mounting solution, it's based off quarter 20 threads, so there's a million other ways you could mount it if you wanted to. But it actually Bluetooths to your camera. So you can put this thing anywhere you want within 50 feet of a Reveal trail camera and get a very, very accurate wind reading in that specific situation, in that specific place, not based off of general weather station data. So every one of those photos you now have the exact, not only wind speed, but wind direction. And it'll track that, obviously, at any given time, you can track it live, or you can go historical too. So you can start overlaying photos of maybe a certain buck or a certain bull, right, with the wind data from that day down to the hour, minute, whenever you choose to look at it. And have a very accurate solution to overlay that wind direction and speed with your camera data now.
Damn. When?
July 16th.
Okay. Nice.
Yep.
That's going to be fascinating information. Incredibly helpful. I talk about this all the time. People, especially bow hunters, bless their hearts, they spend maybe a little bit too much time shooting their bow, and for sure not enough time studying wind. If you would take half of the time that you spend shooting your bow and dedicate that to researching wind and odorants, I promise that is going to get you more elk than shooting your bow a little bit more. I promise you. So being able to use that information is going to be wildly helpful. Well,
I'll give you an anecdotal example here from my own life. I spend a lot of time in the fall hunting in western Wisconsin. I'm from Wisconsin. It's my home state. I have a soft spot in my heart for chasing whitetails there. And western Wisconsin is known to be some of the better whitetail hunting in the country. It's called the driftless area, so it's the area which the glaciers did not go through. So you end up with a lot of topography, bluffs, coulees, things like that.
Because the Wisconsin Glacier went all the way to Mississippi.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. But it missed the western part of the state.
Right.
Yep. So the difference there, right, is you get these, I would say, more similar to changes in topography that you would see in the West than you would typically see in the Midwest. Now, the scale is not as great, right? But you still get those, from the deck to the top of things, pretty significant changes in topography. I have the pleasure of getting to hunt a great, it's a 130-acre piece in western Wisconsin, and you could have 5 different wind directions at 5 different stands on the same day.
For sure.
Because of these changes in topography and some water that runs through there. You can't just make a decision on where you're going to go hunt based off what the Weather Channel tells you the wind direction is doing that day. In this case now, I could have 5 wind sensors, and 5 different cameras in these places where I know get swirling winds or have inconsistent winds. And I can make really informed decisions, not only about where I'm going to hunt, but how I'm going to access those places I hunt, or leave those places I hunt. So I'm not blowing out deer ahead of my hunt or potentially for where I'm going to sit the next day.
Yeah.
And that's information that I didn't have before, right? Or would not have been able to get other than me knowing that ground and what, say, a north wind typically actually means in these spots.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of the stand locations that I hunt, there are 2 dominant winds there. Let's say it's either going to be a north or a south, something like that. And it's really restricted by terrain. So oftentimes what I'll do, if there's a specific choke point or something like that that I'm trying to target, I'll hang stands on both sides of it so that I know. But what has happened to me a lot of times throughout guiding is guys will get in a stand. I made the wrong wind call. The wind's doing the wrong thing. They'll get down, go over to the other stand, and then leave a happy little trail of human all the way over to their other stand. And it's like, oh, that's not going to work either. But that's incredibly valuable information. And that's bottom up stuff, right? Like, that's not something that an engineer is going to realize is a problem. Like, you've got hunters in the house who are saying, hey, we need to know this.
Yeah. And again, I would say companies in the outdoor and especially hunting space have a very similar origin story, right? It was an end user who identified a problem, built a product to solve said problem, right? And built the company off of it. I think as organizations grow and you bring more people in that are specialized in the jobs they do, you have a tendency to move away from that because you want true experts, right, in these given areas. What's really great about this place is, yes, we've brought in those experts that have allowed us to make advancements. Like, we can talk about the new cameras here in a minute and some of the things that they're able to do. But at the end of the day, anytime these product development decisions are being made or product requirement decisions are being made, 50% of the people at that table are end users, right? And a lot of times that's still where the initiation of these ideas come from here.
Yeah.
And they're part of the decision-making process all the way through actual testing of the product before it goes live to the consumer. And I think to your point, like, that's why a product like this now exists, right? Because it was something, frankly, we all wanted in our personal lives. And if we want it, most other hunters probably do too, because they face the same problems we do.
Yeah, going to make them more effective.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to go in with wrong wind, blow that deer out, and never see it again. Or the next time you see it, it's in the back of your neighbor's pickup.
Exactly.
That's a sad day.
Exactly.
Because you have to act like you're happy for them.
But you're not.
I've talked a lot over the years about how my identity is inextractable from my home, like the place that made me. And I feel like that's true for a lot of people who had an upbringing that kept them outside. Who would you be, Greg, if not for the white-tailed deer? Like, if that species didn't exist, how much different would you be as a person?
I mean, so different. I'll tell you a story here. This might not be what you asked for, but it's what came to mind for me. I had the classic, like, boy childhood of my parents tried everything for me. Every single sport, every single activity, from t-ball to karate to baseball, and like nothing stuck because I had a very short attention span. I didn't like to sit around and try and learn things, right? And for whatever reason, and I don't know why, my dad tried archery. And from the boy who was constantly getting in trouble in school because he couldn't sit still to turning into somebody who could spend 4 hours standing in the garage shooting arrows, like something switched in me. Like I clung on to it, right? Mm-hmm. That was the initiation of what really led me in my hunting journey. But like all jokes aside, I think truly I would be a very different person because I would have had to be, frankly, probably medicated or something, right, to like get through my childhood had I not found this outlet. And what's interesting too is, you know, archery led me to hunting. Hunting has become this thing that eventually formed the trajectory of my life, but I went away from it for a while. Like, you know, I was very involved in sports in high school and college, and that didn't leave a lot of time for hunting. And I came back to it with a renewed passion that I didn't even have before I kind of went away from it for those things, to the point that I was bound and determined to find a career in this industry, and I didn't care what it took, right? Like I took 4 steps back in my career path, quote unquote, to get into this industry because it was so important to me. Like every decision I made in my life was around hunting. It was hunting seasons, hunting opportunities. And I just figured if I could find a way to work in this industry, it wouldn't feel as much like work. And I felt like I could stay motivated because I didn't stick with things very long in life. Like I would get over them. I would get sick of them. I would get bored with them. And this was kind of, to me, was my cheat code. I was like, all right, if I can find a job in this industry, like maybe I'll stick with it. And that was 15 years ago now. Right. Mm-hmm. And I'm still here. So I know it's a long-winded answer, but I think honestly, it was pretty much everything for me, right? It really has dictated the majority of my adult life, and the things that surrounded my adult life because of hunting. Yeah.
There's a growing quorum of evidence that indicates that ADHD is built for hunting. Like that's not, it's not a disease. It's not a failure or a glitch. It is a mechanism that makes some humans better at hunting than others. And there are a huge number of hunters, and honestly, the most effective hunters I know who struggle with that in other aspects of their life, but not in that one. It's fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, I have no official diagnosis, but you basically just described me.
Well, I mean, you described it. Like, yeah. I'm not trying to diagnose you, but
no, I'm just
yeah.
I think it's true, right? I think if you can find the outlet for it, and for some of us it's hunting, for other people it's other things, like it actually is a superpower.
It is a superpower. Like in some ways. Yeah. Like in other environments it's not. Like it really holds you back. But for hunting, for sure, a superpower.
Well, and I think so much of hunting too translates to other facets of your life that you probably wouldn't think about. Like I was having a conversation with a mutually good friend of ours earlier today about parenthood, mm-hmm. right? And he said this thing that stuck with me, and he's like, I'm new to parenthood. I'm about 4 months in right now. And he goes, I think hunters just make better parents because think about it. Like we're used to being sleep deprived. We're used to like weird hours. We're used to, all these like struggles and whatever. And I was like, yeah, it's kind of true, So I do think that the struggle of hunting, the reality of what we have to do as hunters to be successful, like it does translate to other facets of our lives too that, probably sets us up for success.
Are you talking about Kevin?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dude, what a gem of a human.
I couldn't agree more. I joke that I manufactured a way for us to continue to work together.
Yeah.
Later in our career after we had crossed paths a few times, but it's true. It's like, I would do anything to continue to work with that guy every day.
And he's like Kevin Harlander. He's been on the show, so people are familiar with him, but he's an ultimately nice guy. Like he is nice even by Midwestern standards, which is saying a lot, but incredibly effective at his job. Like
yes,
really, really good at his job.
What I appreciate about Kevin is not only does he march to the beat of his own drum, but he does so with very specific intention.
Yeah.
Right. And I would even say if you look at the career path he has forged for himself, he's somewhat written the book on how to do it in a way that wasn't done before. And it wasn't always widely accepted by the organizations he worked for, but he's stayed true to it, and it's got him to great places in life, right, for the people that appreciate it.
Yeah, definitely. And as much as that guy is made out of whitetail and walleye, like, I mean, that's me with like bear and elk and beef, I guess. Yeah. Was walleye a big part of your youth?
You know, I didn't get bit by the fishing bug.
Okay.
Which is interesting, right? Because by most Midwestern standards, if you hunt, you also fish,
right,
and you do these things in the off seasons of one another. My dad's a huge walleye fisherman. I think I got bit so hard by this whitetail bug that it was just a 365 thing for me, and I wasn't willing to give up scouting time or prep time for any of these other activities, which is largely why, like, I don't do much waterfowl hunting. I do a little. I don't do a ton of upland. I do a little. You know, I chase turkeys every spring because it's something to do, but it's not like all of those things for me were almost just distractions in a way.
Yeah.
And I know that's like blasphemy to a lot of people, but I just got so hyper focused on this one thing that it was all I wanted to devote my time to. And then it kind of switched, and I transitioned that into a little bit of Western passion for a handful of years, right? And learned a lot there, made a lot of mistakes. And, you know, continue to dabble in that too. But I always just, for whatever reason, kind of come back to those dang whitetails.
What is something you know for sure about whitetail deer?
It goes back to what we talked about earlier. You can't fool their nose. I don't care what scent gadget you think you're using, whether that's ozone or carbon clothes or, you know, cover scent or you name it. Like, you can't fool their nose.
Yeah, I could not agree with you more. It warms my heart to hear it, if I'm being honest, because these are conversations that I have over and over again. A bunch of my clients came out of the whitetail world, and they come elk hunting with me, and they subscribed to some of this marketing and some of these tools, ozonics being one of them, right? Like, I understand the physics behind what is happening there with O3, but I also know how much power is required to create enough of it to be meaningful. But I don't try to talk them out of it either, because I believe that confidence is one of the deadliest things that you can put in your pack. So if this camouflage or this scent control system or this device or a gadget, whatever it is, if that increases your level of confidence, use it. And don't let somebody like me try and talk you out of it, right? And I don't do it anymore. If they want to roll ozonics, awesome. Do it. I'll have it charged up and ready to go for you. But if you want to talk about how these odorant molecules actually work, I'm happy to talk about that too. But you know, if that's going to destroy your confidence or make you nervous, then that's a problem. But yeah, we have to have the wind on our side. Something I've been trying to get across to elk hunters in particular about wind is that I think that they've been lied to a little bit in that they want the wind in their face. And I'm going to say this over and over and over again until people are exhausted of hearing about it. If you're calling in a bull elk and the wind is in your face, you've put that animal at a disadvantage. It believes that you're an elk because you're doing a good job of calling. But because its primary sense is smell, it knows that it is at a disadvantage because this elk that it's moving towards can smell him and he can't smell it. So you can put that elk on an even playing field in his mind by having a crosswind so that neither of you can smell the other. When wind switches, it tends to switch 180 degrees because it's moving from one high pressure area to a low pressure area. And these things are always balancing. The thing that I really want people to start paying attention to, and it's hard to do, before the wind switches, it stops. It doesn't just switch instantly unless you're in like a little dust devil or something, but it stops. I want you to recognize when the wind stops and pay attention to that and start getting really nervous that it's about to switch, because a huge number of hunters, elk hunters in particular, have the story of this bull was coming and he hung up behind a tree, and I just needed him to take a couple more steps, and then I felt the wind on the back of my neck and he left. In the same way that humans know that light conditions are about to change because we're primarily a visual species, that elk knows that the wind conditions are about to change. He didn't just happen to stop. He stopped because he recognized that the wind had paused and was waiting for it to switch so he could gather more information before he exposed himself to a vulnerability. So if you can set yourself up for a crosswind, you're setting yourself up for more success on both a physical and a biological level with that animal.
There's two things there that I think this is my soapbox. Like, these are the conversations I love to have, right? I think on the wind side, what you're talking about is not dissimilar even in the whitetail world, right? Like, there's this misconception of like, oh, you always want the wind to be in your face. Well, so does that buck you're chasing,
yes,
right? You can't both have the wind in your face and be in a situation where he's going to present himself a shot opportunity to you, right? So a lot of times those quote unquote like bad winds or marginal winds, those are going to be the ones where you're actually going to have a chance to harvest that animal, because again, same as the situation you described with the elk, like you're putting yourself on a level playing field with that deer. He thinks he's safe,
yep,
but you're in a position where he can't smell you yet, right? And that's where you get your opportunities. And I think that's a really overlooked aspect of wind as it pertains to how people think about it for, whitetail hunting the same way you described elk hunting.
You have to give that animal the illusion of advantage from a tactical standpoint.
Yep.
And it was the same way for me, like duking it out with the Taliban in Afghanistan, right? I needed them to have the illusion of advantage where I actually had the advantage. That's how we win. When I was coyote hunting growing up, I would go to a hillside where I could see for miles and miles and miles, and I would either blow or play a call at ear-popping volumes and just think that I would see coyotes running towards me from a great distance where I'd have all the time in the world to get ready. And it didn't work very well. I was putting that predator at a disadvantage. So when I started picking calling locations where a predator would feel good about moving in on a spot to attack an animal that was vulnerable, I started calling in a lot more coyotes, right? I still had the advantage, but I was not putting that coyote at a huge disadvantage. And I think we need to always think of that other animal's perspective first.
Well, and I think nothing's 100%. There's no silver bullet. There's no black or white. Hunting is shades of gray, right? And I think the way you described previously things like scent control and camouflage and you name it, like, and I came from this industry. I used to design camouflage, right? But I'm of the school of thought where I don't think any single one of those things is going to make you successful or not successful. I think there are certain practices that may give you a percentage better opportunity, right? Like, we'll just use camouflage for example, right? Like, do you have an extra 2 seconds, right? Because you are not completely silhouetted in the way that you would if you're wearing all one color of clothing, and that gives you a shot opportunity. Maybe, maybe not, right? Does the fact that you treated your clothes with ozone before you went in the woods, right? Like, are you eliminating all your scent? Absolutely not. Are you eliminating some of it? Maybe, maybe not, right? So I think any of those things, I think the confidence thing to your earlier point is huge. But if you start to stack those things on top of one another, again, it's not a silver bullet. You're never going to fool an animal's nose. You're never going to completely fool their eyes. But if you can gain small percentages of advantage that maybe allow you to get a shot opportunity, those are the things that add up, right? So that's kind of my take on the whole, like, stacking these things, right? But ultimately, I think it goes back to, it's like, you're going to be the most lethal when you're the most confident. So you got to do the things that you believe in.
There's something that really stresses me out about a lot of camouflage, because I think that nature has had a long time to work on these things, longer than we have. Can you give me an example of a green mammal?
I cannot.
Yeah, there isn't one.
Yeah.
If green was a good camouflage color for mammals, they'd have done that.
Yes.
Right?
Well, look at the camouflage industry in general.
Yeah.
90% of camouflage is designed to look good hanging on a clothing rack in a Bass Pro Shop or a Cabela's.
And that's their first battle,
Yeah.
right? That's their first battle, because they need to make something that's effective for a hunter, but they've got to get them to buy it first.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I look at natural camouflage. Like if I was to pluck a hair off of one of these deer that's back behind us, it would be easy to say this is tan or this is brown. But if I look at it closely, there's 50 colors within that single strand of hair. That's what makes natural camouflage really effective, is how many colors occur over a very, very small area. And it's super interesting to me. I would love to be able to design a camouflage starting at a microscopic level and moving out from there. But the manufacturing of that would make it too expensive as a product. So walking off that, now what can I do to make my camouflage a little bit more effective? When I get home from this trip, I'm going to be taking my camo that I'll be hunting in this fall, a lot of which is green, and I'll be hanging it on a line in the sun so that I can use ultraviolet to start breaking it down a little bit and taking the sheen off of it, getting any scent out of it that might have come from a factory that's got like a chemical smell. And I'm going to be using ultraviolet to make this stuff more effective. And then I'm going to be dragging it around in the brush and roughing it up and trying to get it a little bit quieter and things like that to get it ready for the fall. I'm not just going to pull it out of the closet and wear it. And I think of this stuff like I'm always trying to use natural models. So like footwear, most of the boots that get worn for hunters more similarly imitates prey animals' feet than it does predators, right? I am in the role of a predator. So what does a bear's foot look like? What does a cougar's foot look like? What does a wolf's foot look like? Well, they're all soft. They're all soft. They don't have hard parts. A mountain lion has claws that it can retract so that it doesn't have anything hard that could potentially click on a rock or something like that. And it has the reputation of being the stealthiest animal in our woods, right? So when I hunt in the softest footwear that I can find that will protect my little baby white boy feet. So I'm out there wearing barefoot shoes because that is the most similar thing I can have to the predators that are doing this stuff for a living, that don't have the advantage of a projectile, right? They've got to kill it with their face. I would starve to death if I had to do that. So I've got to take these lessons that I can possibly learn from these animals and apply them to myself.
Well, and so like, let's go back to the camouflage thing, right? Like I love that perspective because I think what we forget to do a lot of times as hunters is flip the script, right? Picture yourself in that deer stand watching a deer come in. When that deer is walking, it's very easy to see that deer. Mm-hmm. When that deer stops, even though you know exactly where it is, it's very easy to like lose that deer and not like, is it still there? Did it walk away? Did I miss it? Right? The same principle, like those are the same natural principles we should apply to the way we hunt, right? It doesn't matter what camouflage or lack thereof camouflage you're wearing. Movement is always going to be king over what you're trying to conceal yourself with. Mm-hmm. Right. And I think it just goes back to exactly what you're saying. It's like, what cues can we take from the natural environment? And these are situations where it's like, we experience that every time we go hunting.
And that comes down to understanding that movement perspective. For example, when to draw your bow. If I'm looking straight forward and something moves across my vision, right to left, very, very easy for me to detect that movement. If it's moving directly towards me from any kind of distance, very difficult. Now, if I'm looking straight forward and something moves off to the side while I'm moving and the whole world is movement, impossible to detect. So if that animal is crossing in front of you, everything in its peripherals appears to be moving, and you can add to that movement without as nearly as much of a problem as if it's moving towards you or if you're moving left and right. So when I'm, say, stalking a water buffalo in northern Australia, I can get away with moving directly towards that animal really slowly, and I can sneak within archery range and kill it. If I take one step to the side, it's going to pick me up. It's going to pick up that movement. So we really need to think about angles of movement as they're perceived by that animal. And I think knowing when to draw your bow is one of the greatest challenges in archery hunting.
Well, and I think I'll call it kill porn because it is what it is. Like linear, like old school whitetail TV has done such a disservice because in every single one of those shows, what happens? The deer's walking, somebody makes a noise, the deer stops, then they draw their bow and shoot said deer, right? In your example, like you should be drawing when that deer is actually moving because then you have that advantage, especially if it's moving across like left to right in front of you because you are in its peripherals. Everything's moving to it, right?
Yeah, you can MERP at full draw.
Yeah, exactly. But I think it's so ingrained in so many of us, right? Because they watch Michael Waddell do it 500 times on, on a TV show. And that's what to me, I am forever a student of that game, right? And that's what really attracts me to this pursuit because I don't necessarily feel like there's a finish line.
Yeah.
Like I feel like there's always things to learn and there's degrees of things that you can improve upon, right? And like I don't pretend to have this all figured out. Like I still learn stuff every year that makes me hopefully better at this pursuit, right? And I think that's why it's attractive to me, right? Because there's no finish line. There's no end game, right?
And we're spending all this time talking about like the animal's senses and how they detect us. And if we flip that script again, how do we detect that animal? Well, I need to have eyes in the woods so that I know when and where they are, right? The saying that I heard from people, regardless of whether it was fishing or hunting or whatever, when I lived in North Carolina was you got to hunt where the turkeys are. And that's true. If you're turkey hunting in a place where there are not turkeys, you're not going to kill a turkey. So how do we figure out where the turkeys are? We hang cameras that are infinitely patient, that will wait and wait and wait, and then they will take a picture or a video, and then they will, in the case of reveal, will send that to me so that I can see what's going on in these different locations. And then I can make decisions about when and where I need to be for hunting. The evolution of that is constantly changing, right? Like from where these cameras started to where they are now is almost indistinguishable. What's next?
It's a good question. And here's my perspective on it. I think if you look at the hardware component of it, because there's two components, right? There's the hardware component, which is the physical component that you go put in the woods.
Yep.
And then there's the software component. It's the backside. It's the app. It's what connects that camera to your phone, right? So that you can see those pictures.
Yep.
Hardware evolution will always continue to happen. And I think the really cool thing about the space we're in is that there is technology evolution going on in parallel spaces that are adjacent to hunting that will impact and eventually become an advantage to us as hunters because of that technology being able to be implemented into a camera.
Yeah, whether that's aerospace or media or military, like there's somebody else who's kind of moving their own ball down the field, and then we can pull pieces off that and use what's applicable for what we're trying to do.
Exactly. So, I'm sure we'll talk about the new cameras we have coming out here, but it's like we're not the only ones working on improving battery technology. We have the advantage of learning and using and that other parallel technology into our piece, or our camera. So that will always continue to happen. But if you think about it, the limiting factor of hardware evolution is going to be the componentry that makes up that hardware.
Yeah.
So that's always your bottleneck, right? What's really interesting to me in terms of the evolution of trail cameras, and I think what maybe not enough people pay enough attention to, is that software side. Mm-hmm. The evolution there is infinite. You don't need a piece of hardware or a component to evolve software.
Right.
Right. And like internally, our software engineering team is as big as our hardware engineering team. And I think that is where we are going to see the most evolution and the most change in terms of how we interface with this hardware, and how valuable of a tool it is to us is the evolution of that software. And to simplify that, right, that might sound like I'm kind of speaking in generalities, but if you think about the data associated with any given photo, the ability to consolidate that data, read that data, predict trends, right, based off that data, or even just give you a general indication from millions of data points down to something that's digestible for you. However we're using that or applying that, like that is where we're going to see the biggest leaps and bounds, right? And I think what trail cameras become outside of some of the really cool stuff that's happening on the hardware side.
I want to talk about 4.0, but before I get to that, there has to be a conversation about where is the line of like ethics and fair chase. And these are conversations that I'm having quite often. And in my home state of Oregon, the folks who sit on the Fish and Wildlife Commission, the folks that sit on the board of the Oregon Hunters and Anglers Association are they're old. They're old people. And they came from a different era of technology, and they're pretty risk averse when it comes to technology. And we'll see these crazy juxtapositions of people who are ride or die traditional bow hunters, but they might show up to their hunting location in a jet, and they might be using a broadhead that was designed with a CNC machine that is technology that NASA would have killed for when they were first trying to get to the moon. They are probably using a cell phone, which is arguably one of the most powerful pieces of equipment that has ever existed on this earth, right? And then what they're doing in their brain is traditionally hunting. They're hunting in a traditional way. It's very interesting to me, all this juxtaposition, the comparisons and the collisions between these two things. And there's some folks there who think that we shouldn't use cell cameras. And I've had a lot of conversations with them about it. One of which is that in Oregon, we cannot hunt cougars with dogs. And we have a huge cougar population and a rapidly diminishing mule deer population. We have a diminishing elk population. We have an increasing bear and wolf population. And since we don't have effective tools like baiting or using dogs to control these predator populations, one of the last effective tools we have are cell cameras. And when we can eventually hunt wolves in Oregon, which will certainly happen at some point because the wolf population continues to grow, and hunting per the North American model for wildlife conservation is the mechanism with which we control wildlife and how we fund wildlife research and conservation. Cell cameras are going to be a huge part of that. They're going to be a huge part of that. We need to keep that around. But are there conversations that happen in-house here of like, what does too far look like? Because you're capable of doing things that really do threaten, what we consider to be fair chase, and you're not doing them, but you want to continue improving and advancing capabilities. Like that's a tough job.
It's really tough, right?
Yeah.
And I think the short answer to your question is yes. There are those conversations that happen all the time here. Mm-hmm. And largely that's because so many of the people that work here also hunt.
Right.
They're impacted by these decisions,
yeah.
right? I have a couple ways, because I have this conversation a lot, partly because of the place I work,
yeah.
right? And partly because of the circles I run in, and I think we all care about this stuff, right? And I don't think any of them are perfect explanations, but I found a few that at least make sense to me as it pertains to this subject. The first one, I think, is the evolution of technology is out of our control. Whether we participate in it or not, it is going to happen. I look at it the same way, when I was in elementary school, I remember the computer becoming a thing, mm-hmm. right? And there was these very same conversations. There was one group of people that this is going to be the greatest thing since sliced bread. And there was a group of people that thought it was going to ruin the world.
I didn't take typing in school because I wasn't sure if I would need it or not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now we all walk around with a supercomputer in our pocket. Like we know which way that went, right? I think the same thing is true of technology and hunting. Whether we want to bury our head in the sand and act like it isn't going to happen, or not, it's going to happen. So we are at a unique position here at Tactacam, I think, because of A, the product we make, B, the size of which our company is, and C, the level of, for lack of a better term, give a shit we have, where we can actually have those conversations in a very impactful way. And I would much rather be a participant in the conversation and have an active role in driving where these things end up than be a bystander. And let me give you an example of that, right? In the state of Montana, and we're not the only state, but I'll talk about Montana because we're here right now. You can have trail cameras out year long. What's illegal is if you are actively receiving information from that camera that aids in your hunting, right? So historically, if you wanted to be perfectly legal, the by the law or the by the book way to do that would mean you could have cellular trail cameras out until hunting season rolled around, and then you would go take them all down so that it couldn't be misconstrued that you were using that information from that camera while you're actively hunting to help you harvest an animal. We, because of who we are, we're able to have conversations with fish and game agencies across the United States around this because we know it's coming, right? It's happened here, it's coming other places. And the conversation was, how can we work with you instead of trying to circumvent what you're trying to accomplish here, right? We now have a product in the app called HuntSync where you can turn off the connection between your camera and the app itself while you're in the field. And it timestamps that with the exact time you turned it off, and it shows when that connection was broken. So it allows hunters to still utilize these cellular trail cameras as a tool, right? But abide by the law, like, the law that is in the state of Montana. That came from us being a part of that conversation and using that technology to actually aid in hunters' ability to use the product versus, try and fight against it.
Nice.
So I think that's part of it. I don't think that answers your total question, right?
Well, I don't think it's a question that has an answer, right? It's a question that demands constant conversation from everybody involved. But I think that that's an excellent answer.
I think the other part of it too is if we look at the thing that we care about, aka hunting, that's what we're talking about. Hunting will only continue to exist if we have a sufficient pool of people who represent hunters, right? AKA ourselves. And whether that's in conversations with your peers at the local government level, at the ballot box, at the conservation level, we need to be well represented, because if we're not represented, other people are going to make decisions for us. One of the ways in which we refill our pool or make sure that our number of hunters stays the same is to recruit new hunters into the hunting way of life. Now, I know that's a completely separate conversation between the R3 initiative. Is there more hunters? Is there less hunters, et cetera? But I think we can all agree upon the fact that, it's the bathtub analogy. You have to have as much water coming in as you do water coming out to sustain the amount of water in the bathtub.
Yeah.
I think as our world evolves, the barrier to entry for hunting is growing greater and greater. If you don't come from a hunting family, if you don't have hunting mentors, it's really hard to get into hunting.
It's hard to navigate a website to figure out how to do it.
Well, yeah, that and add the lack of access, right? 20 years ago, it was a lot easier to find a place to hunt than it is now. I think we provide a tool that does lower that barrier to entry to hunting because it will never replace woodsmanship. At the end of the day, it is a tool. It doesn't kill a deer or an elk or a bear for you. If you don't know how to pursue that animal, you could have 500,000 cameras out there. You're still going to be SOL, right? But if you think about how much you can learn about animals and their behavior and their tendencies just from watching them on a camera, that theoretically, if you're interested in it, should be able to lower your barrier to entry to hunting. So I do think there's another aspect of our product that will also help ensure that this is a pursuit, right, that we all get to participate in for the foreseeable future as well. So I think that's the other side of the coin as part of this conversation too.
Yeah. And you and I are both hunters, so this is what we talk about. I know a huge number of people who run these cameras because they're interested in the world, and they don't hunt at all, but they love seeing the wildlife that moves around and getting these photos. And, my family in Alaska that wants to see when a brown bear cruises through their yard when, they're living in Hawaii, they love that. That's so cool. And you don't have to be a hunter to think that this is interesting, to have this thing out there that is that's taking these pictures for you and sending them to you so that you can see what's going on in the world, because your cameras will see things that you never will, that you didn't think were possible. I've learned more about elk from the audio that I get out of these videos than I have from the videos themselves. I've heard sounds that I didn't know elk were possible, like that they could even make, bulls that cow call. I've got videos of that I've watched over and over and over again, trying to detect any nuance so that when I hear it, I'll know, okay, that subtlety there, that's actually a bull and I can't find it. But if I was just in the woods and I heard it, I would just go, that's a cow. And I would never think about it again. I would never know that was a possibility. And that's just one small detail of things that you learn that are just so freaking cool. I posted a mountain goat running away from a cow elk through a mountain pass a little while ago. And it looks like an AI image. And it's not. Like, this is a real thing that happened. A cow elk chased a mountain goat through a pass. That's so freaking wild. I would never know about that. I can't get enough of it. Okay, the 4.0, I've been using 3.0s for a couple years now. It was a meaningful improvement, but I want to talk about the 4.0. I want to talk about batteries, and I want to talk about the intelligence of a battery itself, because energy is a huge thing in our world in all kinds of ways, and we have an increasing demand for energy. We don't have an energy supply problem. We have an energy storage problem. And the oil that we use is solar energy that was stored in, largely like plankton matter millions of years ago. Like that's still solar energy that was able to get stored in organisms through carbon-based life forms. It's very, very cool. But the way that we're storing energy in these batteries is getting smarter and smarter and smarter. So talk me through the 4.0. Talk me through how a battery can be intelligent.
Yeah, so the 4.0, if you look at the evolution of trail cameras, and I'm lumping Reveal into this, every year there's these new high-tech, fast-paced, really cool features, right? I think that's oftentimes what we attribute to a new camera model, the evolution, etc. At the end of the day, and this is really what excites me about the 4.0, I think if you boil it down, all of those features are great, but they only work if a camera's on, right?
Hard fact.
Not only do they only work if a camera's on, but what's the reason for putting a camera in the woods? You want a photo or a video, right? So if we really boil this down to what 99.9% of people want out of a trail camera, and I can back this up, right? We have 250 plus customer service agents that are talking to people every single day of the year on the phone. The two things we get the most from people's wish lists are battery life and image quality. Now, mind you, the 4.0 does not lack any of those high-tech, fast-paced, high-speed new features. But really what we set out to do, the 4.0, was in addition to that, how do we just completely change the game? Like not a 15% increase, not a 50% increase, minimum of 100% increase in a battery life. And how do we just have the best image and video quality that we've ever had before? That is, if you remember nothing about the 4.0 than those two things, that's it. It's the best battery life of any cellular trail camera on the market, including any previous Reveal, up to 2 to 3 times any previous Reveal. And it's the best image and video quality we've ever had.
Can we put any kind of numbers on that?
Yes. The answer is yes. Here's where numbers are hard.
Yeah.
When we get to battery life, right, I can tell you, I can speak in generalities and averages, but it's not going to apply to everybody because something like signal strength,
right,
that impacts your battery life. Yeah. I don't know what your signal strength is, right? The settings that you choose. If you look at all the combinations of you could choose hundreds of different combinations of setting on your camera. I don't know what yours are, right? So I'll give some general numbers, but I just want to preface this with this is all very dependent on some of these other factors, right? What I can say in terms of numbers is we have very thoroughly tested these things in a controlled environment in the lab, and we've seen that 2 to 3 times improvement on battery life over our previous model. So
Okay.
let's just anecdotally say a 3.0 you were getting 4 months of battery life out of, you'll get 8 to 12 months of battery life on a 4.0 compared to that.
Nice.
Now, again, depends on all those settings, things like that, right? Image quality is really hard. Companies like to use megapixels as a cloak about their image quality. Really, a good image from a cellular trail camera has nothing to do with the number of megapixels. There are quote unquote 8 megapixel cameras out there that are going to give you a way better image than a 40 megapixel image. Now, a big part of that is that camera takes the photo. It needs to be compressed and manipulated to then send that photo to your phone, which has its own bottlenecks in terms of limitations of how high quality an image it can actually present to you. So things like the various light qualities and contrasts and compression rates, like that's going to actually impact your image quality more than anything else, right? When you look at a photo from a 4.0, it looks like a photo that was taken from a DSLR camera, not a cellular trail camera. So at the end of the day, what I encourage is like, don't fall under this guise of how many megapixels a camera is. Look at an image. Our eyes are very keen to what is a good image and what is not. And even if you compare the 4.0 to 3.0, which had incredible image quality, it's light years better. So that one's a little bit harder, I think, to put an actual quantitative number on. But once you see it, it's unmistakable, right?
Nice. That's cool. That's helpful. I had a camera that was a 3.0 that I put out on High Mountain Pass at about 8,000 feet. And it took a bunch of cool pictures of bighorn sheep and cougars, one mule deer, and some mountain goats and stuff like that. And I watched the snow level coming up, and then pretty soon the snow buried my camera, and I was like, oh, it's a goner. That thing sat underneath the snow all winter long, and when the snow melted, it sent me pictures again as the animals are coming back into the high country next spring. I was very impressed by that. And that was, gosh, probably 10 months from when I put it out. And it wasn't taking a lot of photos or anything like that, but very, very impressed by that. And it was such a cool thing because I just thought it was, done for. But no, that camera's still rocking and rolling, which is pretty cool. Just go back and swap out batteries once a year.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I love that. Back to your question about battery life, right? Power consumption.
And battery intelligence.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's a couple things with the 4.0s that really move the needle. Most of it is if you think about like the operating system, right? Like the power management system of the hardware itself. 99.9% of time when that camera's in the woods, it's not actually doing anything.
Yeah.
Right? It's not taking a picture. It's waiting.
Yeah.
So a big limiting factor with regards to how long your camera lasts is how much power is that camera using when it's not taking a picture, right? I joke, but this is true. Like, the whole saying like, oh, it's not rocket scientists, right? It's like rocket scientists are the most intelligent people in the world. We literally went out and hired engineers that used to work on power systems from rockets, and that's who designed the power system for this camera.
Yeah.
So most of that efficiency, right, that increase in battery life is truly just from an efficiency of power consumption of the camera and the time that it's not doing anything. So that's where you're going to see these big leaps and bounds, right? Beyond that, and I can say that because we know this to be true. Like we tested these cameras with like bottom of the barrel AA batteries. We're not even getting into our own lithium batteries yet, which is a whole separate conversation in terms of intelligent power systems. But that's true regardless of what power source you're using. So that's going to solve the problem for 99.9% of the people, and you're going to see that improvement just based off the improvement in the actual camera itself and how it uses power. Now, beyond that, we came out with, depending on when you're listening to this, a new line of lithium batteries, and it's called the FlexPack system. There's 3 options in that FlexPack system. One is the battery tray that comes on the camera. It's the one that you can put 12 AA batteries in of your choosing. Right? The FlexPack is just the name of the system. Just like Milwaukee tools have their fuel system, right? It's the name of the batteries. The second is a 5,000 milliamp hour battery, and then the third is a 10,000 milliamp hour battery. Previously, you were only able to put a 5,000 milliamp hour battery in any of our cameras because the battery size was limited by it having to fit inside of the camera. Now it attaches onto the bottom of the camera, so we can make the batteries any size we want. What's really cool about that is you can customize the camera to your needs. If you want a really small, compact package, you put the smaller battery on there. If you want one that's going to last you over a year in the woods, you put the bigger battery on there. The other thing about lithium batteries, and this goes back to, I think, more of the heart of your initial question, is it's not necessarily like, I'm trying to think of the way to describe it. This is the best way I think I can describe it. Okay, if you buy a pack of AA batteries off of Amazon, right, some generic brand, you're very likely not going to get the same performance out of them as, let's say, if you buy Duracell or, let's just use Duracell as an example, right, like a name brand battery. But they're both the same. They're both AA batteries, right?
Right.
Yeah, they're both AA batteries, but what's on the inside of those batteries is not necessarily the same. You're comparing apples to oranges, right? So even our new 5,000 milliamp hour battery, which is the quote unquote same size as our previous lithium battery pack, the components of which that battery is made from are actually better. So it's not apples to apples, right? You're going to get actually more power out of the new batteries, and that comes down to battery technology than you are the old ones.
Yeah.
Like I said, not an engineer. I can't necessarily explain the whys about that, but I think it's just that understanding that just because there's a number associated with it, you're not actually comparing necessarily the same things, and you're going to see a dramatic improvement with these flex pack batteries over our previous ones.
And there's engineers, and then there are electrical engineers.
Yes.
And I'm not smart enough to talk to the latter and understand what they have to say, but I can understand that that there's options for batteries and that they last a lot longer. If I do, and you may not know the answer to this, if I do throw 12 Duracell AA batteries in there, how would that translate to milliamp hours?
I do know this. I don't know the answer to that exact question. What I do know is that we looked at the average life of a camera and the number of batteries, AA batteries you would need to run that camera for its average life. And a 5,000 milliamp hour battery will replace upwards of 1,000 batteries over the life of that camera, if that makes any sense.
Yep.
So a 10,000 milliamp hour battery will replace up to 2,000 batteries. So from just an economic standpoint,
right,
if you think about the cost of, $50 to $60 for a lithium battery, or even, our larger one, which is $90 to $100, over the life of that camera, which most cameras are lasting 5+ years, right? You're going to spend somewhere between 4 to 8 times as much buying AA's for that same period of time as you would on one lithium battery, because you can recharge it, right?
Yeah. And if you're running solar, then it can just keep living out there.
Yeah, I mean,
which is what I do. I run solar on these cameras.
Yeah, and again, going back to the intelligent design of the battery, the camera's ability to talk to the battery and have readings back and forth with regards to when it needs to consume power, the level of the battery, and then also its ability to integrate in a smart way with our solar panels, which I can get into if you want. Realistically now, unless you are a user that maybe has a camera on a feeder that's taking thousands and thousands of photos a day, changing batteries should be a thing of the past if you have a right combination of the battery itself and potentially accessories to support recharging that battery.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing. It's cool. When is that available?
So all of these products that we've talked about will release on July 16th.
And where can people get them?
Any of your major sporting goods stores, so Scheels, Cabela's, Bass Pro, Tractor Supply, Walmart, like any of those major stores are going to carry them. We have an awesome network of local dealers. So think, smaller dealers like mom and pop bow shops, things like that, outdoor sporting goods stores. We're in most of those. You can always find them on our website, which is tactacam.com, or our Amazon channel. It's not too hard to find them. They're pretty readily available.
Okay. Trying to think what else. So those are going to come out here just in a couple weeks, and then if somebody has like a legacy Tactacam, is there any incentive for them to upgrade?
Yeah, I mean, let me tell you, this is the other thing that I love about this company. So we're releasing a firmware update to 3.0 cameras around the same time that we're releasing these 4.0 cameras. And this is our commitment to the customers, where we try not to create throwaway products. We have a lot of Gen 1 cameras, like the first camera we ever built, that are still in the field.
Yep.
Like upwards of 80 to 90% of them. So it's not a disposable product. So with this firmware update that we're releasing, you're actually going to get a lot of the, not all of, but a lot of the features. So for example, like live streaming, I'll just use this as my example. Previously, the only Reveal camera that had live streaming capability was the Ultra. We've built that into the 4.0s. This firmware update will actually make all of your current 3.0s compatible to do live streaming if you choose to do so.
Okay.
So there's a lot of incentive to keep running the cameras that work.
Okay.
Right.
Well, that's really nice because, dude, a lot of these companies, like iPhone, for example, like everybody's phones kind of start working worse as you roll up to launching a new iPhone, and it's like, oh crap, this thing doesn't work anymore. But you guys are going the opposite direction. You're trying to make your legacy cameras work better, and then also providing, a better camera because it's got, better hardware, more adaptability in the battery systems, better image quality, all that stuff for people who want additional cameras or want to get into a new camera.
Exactly.
That's nice. That's nice of you. You didn't have to do that.
But I think like the advantage to the new one is truly that, right?
Yeah.
It's like, if you don't want to have to worry about battery life anymore,
Yeah.
and you want the absolute best images you've ever seen from your cellular trail camera, like this is the solution for you.
Yeah.
If your 3.0s are working great for you and you're happy with them, like we just made them better.
Dude.
Keep running them and grab a 4.0 to supplement.
I'm excited. I'm going to have so much freaking work to do putting these things out. I'm pumped about it. Yeah. Going to be filling up my Land Cruiser with cameras and going and finding trees to hang them in.
I'm
learning about the world.
I know this is like, I think our industry, especially the hunt space, you hear this every year. It's like, the game changer, the latest and greatest. Like, I think it gets overdone. I can confidently say I have not been this excited about a new product release since I've been part of this organization. And frankly, previous to that, because I was an end user before I started working here.
Yeah.
To me, this is the biggest jump in anything that we've ever done as it pertains to cellular trail cameras. And I will be in the same boat as you. I'm going to be putting out a lot of 4.0s in the next few months, and it's going to be a lot of work.
There's not a single company that I work with that I didn't use before I had any kind of relationship with that company. I enjoy that. I enjoy that because I can approach it from a much more genuine way.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's not dissimilar from the reason I took the original interview here,
Yeah.
right? It's because I was an end user long before I was ever potentially thinking about, coming to work for them. And you look at it from a different perspective because of that historical context.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. Okay, man. Any like how big of a deer are you going to shoot this year?
A big one.
A really big one?
I've got some pretty special tags and opportunities in my pocket this year.
Do you?
Yeah.
All right.
I have a Kansas muzzleloader tag, which is early season in Kansas. I'm excited to get back there. Checking off one of my bucket lists this year. I've always wanted to whitetail hunt in Alberta.
Okay.
We're going to go up there and do that.
You're going to go shiver your timbers?
Yep. There's
Nice.
some big deer up there.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm going to be in probably the best county in Ohio at the right time this year too. So hopefully that's big deer this year.
Is Ohio your rut hunt?
Yeah, that'll be my rut hunt this year.
Nice.
Yep.
Nice.
Yep.
Sick.
So
I expect great things.
I mean, nothing's guaranteed, but
Yeah.
I'm putting myself in the right spots at the right time, I think.
Yeah. Shoot some old ones. Yeah.
That's the goal.
Cool. Looking forward to it. Well, thank you so much for hosting me out here. It's a turn and burn trip for me to roll out to Montana to do this, but it's been so nice to get to meet more of the people that work here and see how well you're taking care of everybody and everybody's passion for it. And, I sat across the table at lunch from a couple engineers, and, they didn't know me. They weren't talking about the World Cup or what they're doing this weekend. They were sitting there at lunch, talking with each other about how to solve the problems of things that they're working on. That says a lot to me. I like that.
I think the fact that there's a lunchroom that people congregate and eat together says a lot about
Totally.
type of people here. It's pretty cool.
It is cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you very much again.
Thanks for coming out, man. We appreciate you making the trip.
Absolutely. Bye, everybody.
Thank you to everyone who has taken the time out of their busy lives to write a review for the show and share it with their friends. I'm extremely proud of how intelligent, engaged, and adventurous this audience is. Original music for the Six Ranch podcast is written and performed by Justin Hay. Art for the Six Ranch podcast was created by John Chatelain and digitized by Celia Harlander. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you again next week.